Joining me now is the Speaker of the House, Republican Congressman Mike Johnson of Louisiana, who just marked 100 days on the job. Mr. Speaker, welcome to Meet the Press.
Hey, Kristen, glad to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you. Before we get to the border talks, I want to ask you about the Middle East. Of course, you just heard me talking to the National Security Advisor about these rounds of retaliatory strikes, which you have been critical of. I want to be very clear, though. What specifically do you want to see, Mr. Speaker? Do you want to see strikes inside Iran?
Well, I do take issue with a little bit of what Jake Sullivan just said. I listened to that interview. It was interesting. We need to make absolutely clear to Iran that nothing is off the table. You know, we maintain peace through strength. That was the Reagan doctrine. That's what President Trump continued, and that's what we have to do right now. We should not be appeasing Iran. That's what the Biden administration has been doing for the last 3 years. We are projecting weakness on the world stage, and frankly, Kristen, that is why our adversaries are acting so provocatively. What we need to be doing right now is turning up the heat on Iran. We need to act to decimate the Iran central bank, the assets that they've held there. We need to lean on international banks to seize the assets of Iranian proxies. We need to put big-time pressure, maximum pressure on their oil exports. There's a lot that we could do to Iran to send a message instead of this appeasement strategy. It's just simply
including
not working.
Strikes, Mr. Speaker? Including strikes, just to be clear?
It should not be off the table. Let me give you just a quick example. You know, in the Trump administration, we used a drone and 3 missiles to take out Qasem Soleimani near Baghdad. That sent a strong message, and it quelled all of the activity there. What we're doing right now, we're using potentially hundreds of munitions to strike close to 100 targets so far, but we're not going right to the heart of the matter. I think that's a real problem.
And of course, the Biden administration has argued they have launched a number of retaliatory strikes against all of those attacks. Let me ask you, though, about your surprise move on Saturday, Mr. Speaker. You proposed a new standalone aid package to provide funding for Israel. It, of course, comes just hours before the Senate is set to unveil the details, the text of its border deal, which would also include funding for Israel and Ukraine. You just heard Jake call it a ploy, a political stunt. Why not wait for the Senate to put out their bill first?
Well, let's make a couple of things clear here, Kristen. You know, we passed the support for Iran many months ago, 3 months ago. Immediately after I became Speaker, we sent the necessary resources there. We passed our bill on border security 9 months ago. It's been sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk collecting dust ever since. The H.R. 2, which is our signature bill right out of the beginning, right out of the blocks for the House Republican Conference and our Republican majority, would have solved this problem. We would resolve the broken asylum system and the broken parole system. We would reinstitute Remain in Mexico, which would stem the flow by probably 70%. We would end the catch and release, the mass releases of illegals into our country that's happened. This border is out of control. All these problems have mounted, and the Senate has been dithering ever since. We cannot wait anymore. The reason we are going to send the new Israel package over is because the time is urgent, and we have to take care of that responsibility.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, that bill that you passed in the House would be dead on arrival in the Senate. Your Republican colleagues in the Senate have said as much. So I guess my question is, did you propose this standalone Israel aid package to kill this compromise deal in the Senate?
No, we've made very clear what the requirements of the House were, and that is to solve the problem at the border. Apparently, the Senate has not been able to come to an agreement. They've been suggesting text should be filed maybe today, but we've been told the same thing for months now. We've been awaiting their action. We cannot wait any longer. The House is willing to lead, and the reason we have to take care of this Israel situation right now is because the situation has escalated, of course. I mean, the Hamas terrorists have not relented in their attacks on Israel. We're now having, of course, U.S. personnel being fired upon there. And of course, with the retaliatory strikes that are taking place, the heat has been turned up there. Israel has never been in greater need of our support, and the House is serious about that. I believe we'll pass this with a wide margin and take care of that responsibility.
As you know, though, the Senate is poised to release the bill text today, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about what is in it. We haven't seen all of the details yet, but it is expected to speed up the asylum process, mandate DHS shut down the border during surges, end so-called catch and release, which you just mentioned, and expand migrant detentions, just to name a few of the things that it does. Will you put a bill like that on the floor for a vote, given that you're saying we have to address the crisis at the border?
Well, you're addressing some of the rumors about what are in this text. It's been negotiated behind closed doors by a small handful of persons, and even most of the members of the Senate don't know what's in it. What we've also heard is in it is that there might be limits of thousands per day before retaliatory measures or any measures would be taken place to shut down the border. But here's the essential point. The President of the United States opened the border. We documented 64 specific actions that Joe Biden and his agencies have taken to create this catastrophe. They did it intentionally. That's why his approval rating is in the tank. 60% of the people disapprove by your latest poll. The reason the presidency is imperiled, as your opening monologue stated, is because this is an abject failure of leadership. The American people are done with this. The border has to be secured. And the president has the authority right now. He doesn't need another act of Congress. He could do it right now, but he's unwilling to do it.
As you know, the White House has completely dismissed the allegation that in any way the migrants and surge in migrants have been intentional on the part of the president. In terms of him being able to take action right now, Mr. Speaker, you know as well as I do that an executive order would only be met by legal challenges. You have a chance to do something right now. The details we laid out are not rumors. That is based on negotiators who were in the room. Were you offered a briefing on this compromise bill, and will you put it on the floor?
Well, when they began to do the negotiation, I suggested immediately after taking the gavel, I suggested to Senate leadership that the House should be involved. We should be in the room. I wanted to send the chairman of our committees of jurisdiction to be a part of that negotiation, and they said, no, let the Senate take care of it. We'll send you something that is palatable.
Were you offered a briefing, Mr. Speaker?
What we're hearing right now is not.
But were you offered a briefing?
No, I have not been. No, I've had individual senators call and give me tips and offered things that are going on in the room, but we've not been a part of that negotiation. And I have been absolutely clear from day one, since literally the next morning after handed the gavel in late October, what the functional equivalents of H.R. 2, what those are and why that was necessary to solve the problem. I took 64 House Republicans to the border in January. We heard from the people in charge, the Border Patrol agents, the people there, and they said, these are the things that you must do to stem the flow. And the reason we have the biggest immigration catastrophe, border catastrophe in U.S. history is because President Biden took these actions. I can name them for you specifically what he did.
Speaker,
he does have executive authority right now.
Mr. Speaker, you talk about H.R. 2. Again, Senator Lindsey Graham, your Republican colleagues say that stands no chance of passing through the Senate. You have an opportunity to do something right now about the situation at the border, which you've been calling for new legislation on the border since you first took office. But let me ask you about Donald Trump. He said any Republican who votes for this deal should be ashamed of themselves. You've said you speak to him frequently and that you've discussed this deal with him, quote, at length. Is Donald Trump calling the shots here, Mr. Speaker?
Of course not. He's not calling the shots. I am calling the shots for the House. That's our responsibility. And I have been saying this far longer than President Trump has. I have been saying what the requirements are to fix the problem. I don't care if they call the legislation H.R. 2 or not. What we're saying is you have to stem the flow. The president has executive authority right now. As Congress does this negotiation and the debate and discussion, the president could stop it. Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Supreme Court has already acknowledged, gives the president broad executive authority. He could close the border literally overnight, but he refuses to do it.
You know that former President Trump took executive action. He got tied up in the courts. Any executive action is going to get tied up in the courts. You have been calling for legislative change to actually deal with this problem. You are now the Speaker of the House. Do you not have a responsibility to your voters, to the people who put you in office, to address what you have called a crisis and a catastrophe? Isn't something better than nothing?
Kristen, we did that. We did that 9 months ago. And since we passed our measure in the House to solve this problem, and the reason we had to do it is because we saw that President Biden was not fulfilling his obligation under the law. That's why this is such a failure of leadership. But we did our part. And by the way, since then, in the 9 months since that bill has sat on Chuck Schumer's desk collecting dust, 1.8 million illegals have been allowed into this country, welcomed into the country, sent around the nation into every communities near everyone listening and watching this morning. And that is a catastrophe. And the American people know it, and that's part of the reason that Joe Biden has the lowest approval rating of any president facing re-election.
Even former President Trump, though, called for legislative change on this issue. You have one of the slimmest majorities in the House in history. Don't you have to compromise to get something done? What you passed in the House can't pass in the Senate, Mr. Speaker. You know that.
We are willing to work. We are willing to work with the Senate. I am not disclosing that, and I've been very consistent for the 100 days that I've had the gavel. We're willing to work, but they have to be serious about it. If you only do a few of those components, you are not going to solve the problem. And Kristen, that's not a Republican talking point. That's what the sheriffs at the border, the Border Patrol agents, the deputy chief of U.S. Border Patrol, a 33-year veteran of the agency, told us. He said it's as though we're administering an open fire hydrant. He said, I don't need more buckets like the president's proposed. I need to stop the flow. And we know how to do that, but Joe Biden is unwilling to do it.
Let me ask you about your decision. And by the way, Joe Biden has said he would shut down the border. He's calling for more funding. He's calling for you to pass this legislation. Let me ask you about your move to impeach Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. You accuse him of, quote, willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law, a breach of public trust. Mayorkas has said these claims are baseless and politically motivated. What's interesting here is that some prominent conservative legal experts who oppose Donald Trump's impeachment also oppose the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas. This is what Jonathan Turley had to say, Mr. Speaker. He says there is no current evidence that he is corrupt or committed an impeachable offense. He can be legitimately accused of effectuating an open border policy, but that is a disagreement on policy. What has not been shown is conduct by the secretary that could be viewed as criminal or impeachable. Are you impeaching Secretary Mayorkas over a policy disagreement?
Jonathan Turley is a friend and a former colleague. I was a constitutional law attorney, a practitioner, litigator myself. And I also worked on the impeachment defense team for President Trump twice. So I'm very familiar with the law. What we're suggesting here is that Secretary Mayorkas has openly defied federal law, openly, repeatedly engaged in a practice of defying the law that Congress and has put on the books and previous presidents have signed. He has also lied to Congress. He has misrepresented facts over and over. And by that, and because of that, he's obstructed congressional oversight. All of these are constitutional responsibilities that we are unable to fulfill because this cabinet secretary has decided to defy federal law. Extreme times, desperate times call for desperate measures, and that's where we are.
Mr. Speaker, just a couple of points there. Of course, Secretary Mayorkas and you had a dispute over what it means for the border to be secured. So the notion that he lied has not stood up under independent fact checkers when you look at the fact that this was a dispute. Secondly, he says he's following the law. He says that's why new legislation needs to be passed. Mr. Speaker, how does impeaching Mayorkas do anything to address the immediate crisis at the border, which you have called a catastrophe, which you said deserves immediate attention?
Kristen, for that matter, how does passing a new law by Congress do anything to solve the catastrophe that they have intentionally designed and created? If we pass a new law, he won't follow that law either.
It gives the president expanded authorities on asylum. It does a range of different things. But the president is not using the authorities he has right now. All right.
No, Kristen, the president and Mayorkas are not using the authorities they have right now. Yes.
All right. Let me just play. This is, you were, as you just said, a part of President Trump's defense team at his first impeachment. Here's what you had to say about impeachment back then.
The founders of this country warned against single-party impeachments. The founders of this country warned us against a single-party impeachment. The founders of this country warned against a single-party impeachment. You know why? You guys know why. Because they feared it would bitterly and perhaps irreparably divide our nation.
What changed, Mr. Speaker?
Nothing's changed. I would repeat the same refrain over and over because facts are stubborn things and they do not change. The Constitution does not change. Impeachment power is probably the heaviest power that the House of Representatives is given in the Constitution. Next to the declaration of war, you can argue it's the most serious power we have. And it's not to be used for partisan political purposes. That is exactly what they did for Donald Trump.
How is this
they telegraphed they were going to
Mr.
impeach
Speaker,
Donald Trump before he even took his oath of office.
If that's the case, then how is this moment
very
different now?
Kristen, in many ways. Let me explain the many ways. For one, the House has methodically, slowly, deliberately gone through the impeachment process, impeachment inquiry, impeachment investigation on Mayorkas and President Biden himself. We've involved 3 different committees of jurisdiction: Judiciary, Oversight, Ways and Means. We have followed the facts where they have led, not for political purposes, not because we take pleasure in this. It's, again, a heavy thing to look at the impeachment of a president or a cabinet secretary, but these facts require it. The House of Representatives has the constitutional responsibility of impeachment, and that begins with the investigation, and it must be very carefully, methodically done in a nonpartisan manner. That's exactly what the House Republican majority has done here, and it is exactly the opposite of what the House Democrats did in the previous administration. That is a fact, and we can follow those facts and understand them for what they are.
All right. And of course, Secretary Mayorkas has said that the allegations against him are baseless. Mr. Speaker, we really appreciate your time this morning. We do hope that you will come back. We have a lot more to talk about, but there was a lot to discuss about the border today and foreign policy. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.